Karen stole a grandma's parking spot. She regretted it when her car was towed and scrapped. My grandmother's cane hit the pavement at 6 a.m. and that sound still haunts me. She'd fallen trying to reach her own reserved parking spot, blocked by a stranger's car. That car belonged to the HOA president. That morning changed everything for our family. My name is Eva Torres, and this is how a tyrant lost her crown over a parking spot. I never wanted war. I wanted my 81-year-old grandmother to park safely. 6 months earlier, none of us knew the name Karen Whitfield would become a curse word. I moved into Willowbrook Estates to be close to Grandma Rosa after her hip surgery. The community looked perfect: manicured lawns, white fences, and smiling neighbors waving. Grandma Rosa had lived there 22 years, longer than anyone on the board. She had a reserved handicap spot right outside her unit, granted after her surgery. Karen Whitfield became HOA president that spring, promising to restore order and standards. Order, to her, meant control. Standards, to her, meant whatever she personally preferred. I noticed the change slowly: new fines, new rules, new letters stuffed in mailboxes weekly. Neighbors started whispering about violations for mailbox colors and slightly overgrown hedges. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was wrong. It became everyone's business. Karen drove a glossy white SUV she treated like a throne on wheels. She began parking in random spots whenever her assigned space felt inconvenient to her. That morning, she'd parked squarely across Grandma Rosa's handicap space, blocking it completely. Grandma, cane in hand, tried to walk around it and lost her balance on the curb. I heard her cry out from my kitchen window and ran outside in socks. She wasn't badly hurt, just shaken, embarrassed, and furious in that quiet way elders get. I marched to Karen's door, adrenaline hot in my chest, ready for an apology. Karen opened the door already smiling, coffee in hand, completely unbothered by my anger. "Oh, that old space," she said. "I was only there for 5 minutes." 5 minutes was long enough for my grandmother to fall on concrete. I asked her to move the car immediately. She said she had things to finish first. That's when I understood, this wasn't about parking. This was about power. I photographed the SUV blocking the handicap sign, time-stamped, for what I told myself was, just in case. I didn't know yet how many, just-in-case, photos I'd need before this ended. Karen eventually moved her car, but not before telling me to relax, it's just a spot. Grandma Rosa didn't file a complaint. She said, "It's not worth the trouble, Mija." I disagreed, but I respected her wish. For now, I let it go. Almost. A week later, a notice appeared on Grandma's door: handicap signage under review, pending revocation. Karen had quietly submitted a request to reassess my grandmother's disability parking status. No warning, no conversation, just a cold form letter threatening to take away her only close spot. I called the HOA office. The clerk said Karen personally flagged the file for compliance concerns. Compliance concerns. As if an 81-year-old woman's cane was a policy violation. I requested the medical documentation on file. The clerk said records had gone temporarily missing. Missing. Convenient timing. My stomach tightened with a suspicion I couldn't yet prove. I started keeping a folder. Every email, every notice, every date and time, all archived. Grandma laughed at first, calling me paranoid. "You've been watching too many crime shows." But she let me keep the folder anyway, muttering, "Just don't let it eat you alive." The next board meeting, I attended for the first time, sitting quietly in the back row. Karen ran the meeting like a courtroom where she was judge, jury, and prosecutor. She fined a young father $40 for a bicycle left on his own porch. Nobody challenged her. Residents just nodded, eyes down, the way people do when scared. After the meeting, an older neighbor named Frank pulled me aside near the parking lot. "She did this to the Hendersons 2 years ago," he whispered. "They moved out crying." "Crying?" I asked. Frank just shook his head and walked toward his car without elaborating. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and searched Willowbrook Estates HOA complaints. A local forum had 11 posts, all deleted except cached screenshots someone had saved. Former residents described sudden fines, revoked privileges and mysteriously lost paperwork under Karen's tenure. One comment read, "She targets anyone who can't easily fight back. Watch your parents." My hands went cold reading that. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. I printed every screenshot before the forum could vanish like the others apparently had. The next morning, Grandma's handicapped sign had a yellow, pending removal, sticker slapped on it. She stood staring at it, gripping her cane tighter than I'd ever seen her grip anything. "They can't just take it," she said quietly. "Can they?" I didn't have an answer yet. I decided right then, I would find every rule, every bylaw, every loophole Karen relied on. If she wanted a war of paperwork, I would become the best paperwork soldier she'd ever met. I requested Willowbrook's full governing documents under our state's HOA disclosure laws. Karen's assistant stalled for 2 weeks, citing administrative delays that felt suspiciously deliberate. I filed a formal written demand, citing the exact statute requiring release within 10 days. Suddenly, the documents appeared in my inbox, unedited, complete and full of contradictions. Buried in Section 14, disability parking removals required a licensed physician's re-evaluation, not board discretion. Karen had bypassed that entirely, relying only on her own observations of Grandma walking. I requested Grandma's original medical file directly from her doctor, bypassing the HOA completely. Her doctor wrote a blistering letter confirming permanent mobility limitations, no re-evaluation needed, ever. I submitted it via certified mail, demanding written confirmation of receipt within 5 business days. Karen's office confirmed receipt, then somehow lost the file again within the week. That's when Frank found me again, holding a manila envelope like it was contraband. "I kept copies of everything from my HOA years on the board," he said, sliding it over. Inside were 3 years of meeting minutes, budget reports and vendor contracts nobody else had. Karen had approved landscaping contracts to a company registered under her husband's cousin's name. Overpriced invoices, inflated hours, payments routed through an account with her home address listed. Frank tapped the page. "She calls it preferred vendor status. I call it a slush fund." My pulse quickened. This wasn't just petty cruelty anymore. This was potential financial fraud. I photographed every page, careful not to remove originals, careful not to tip my hand. That night, I built a timeline: fines, revoked privileges, vendor contracts, all cross-referenced by date. A pattern emerged: every financial adjustment happened right after a resident challenged Karen publicly. I decided to test something small. I challenged a minor fine at the next meeting. Karen smiled that practiced smile. "The board's decision stands. No further discussion needed." 2 days later, a new invoice appeared for emergency tree trimming near my building. Curious timing. I photographed the trees. Not one branch had been touched. The invoice was pure fiction. I filed a public records request for that specific invoices supporting documentation and photos. The vendor couldn't produce a single before and after photo, standard practice for any legitimate job. I now had 2 confirmed instances of invoices for work that never actually happened. Grandma noticed my late nights and asked what I was building toward. "Evidence," I said simply. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then build it right, Mija." I reached out to a consumer protection attorney who specialized in HOA governance disputes. She reviewed my folder for 20 minutes, then looked up and said, "This is substantial." "Substantial enough for what?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer she might give. "Board removal, financial audit, possibly a fraud referral," she said. "But we need more first." More meant patience. More meant letting Karen keep swinging until she swung herself off balance. I attended every meeting after that, silent, recording, cataloging every small abuse of power. Karen began eyeing me differently, sensing a shift she couldn't quite name yet. She started calling me that troublemaker from Building 4 to other board members, not realizing I heard. Let her call me whatever she wanted. Names don't win lawsuits. Documents do. One afternoon, she cornered me by the mailboxes, voice syrupy sweet, eyes cold as ice. You know, dear, causing trouble here could get your grandmother's whole unit reviewed. A threat wrapped in politeness. I smiled back just as sweetly. Please, review away. I already knew Grandma's unit had 0 violations and 22 spotless years of residency. Karen didn't know that I knew that. Her bluff had just handed me another data point. That night, I added verbal threat of retaliatory review, witnessed near mailbox area, to my timeline. My attorney later told me retaliation against a complainant carries its own separate legal weight. Karen was building her own case against herself, one arrogant sentence at a time. I started noticing something odd. Her SUV appeared in different reserved spots almost daily now. Handicap spots, reserved spots, fire lane markings, nothing seemed to apply to her personally. I photographed each violation, comparing timestamps to the very fines she'd issued other residents. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. She fined a man $40 for a bicycle. Her own repeated parking violations, by her own rulebook, totaled over $600 unpaid. I compiled a formal complaint listing every violation, every date, every matching bylaw citation. I submitted it not to Karen, but directly to the HOA board treasurer and secretary. 2 days of silence followed. Then an email: the board will review this at discretion. Discretion, again. That word had become Karen's favorite shield against any accountability whatsoever. But I noticed something: the treasurer, a quiet woman named Priya, hadn't dismissed it outright. She'd simply said, review, not denied. That small difference felt like an opening crack. I requested a private meeting with Priya, away from Karen's watchful presence entirely. She agreed, but insisted we meet OFF property, at a coffee shop 2 towns over. That level of caution told me more than any document in my folder ever could. Priya arrived nervous, glancing at the door twice before even sitting down across from me. I've wanted to say something for 2 years, she admitted, hands wrapped around her cup. She confirmed the landscaping contracts were signed without full board vote, just Karen's signature alone. Bylaws required 3 signatures for any contract exceeding $5,000. Karen forged the process. I was scared, Priya said. She threatened to have my parking pass revoked if I objected. Fear had kept the board silent for years. My folder was about to break that silence. Priya slid a USB drive across the table. Backup financial records. I copied them secretly. I asked why she hadn't gone to authorities herself before now, and her answer stung. Because nobody believed the little guy against Karen. Not until someone like you showed up. That sentence sat heavy in my chest the entire drive home that evening. At home, Grandma Rosa waited with tea and a worried expression I hadn't seen before. The sticker's gone from my sign, she said. But a new letter came today instead. The letter demanded a hearing to determine continued eligibility for her handicap parking privilege. Scheduled in 5 days, presided over by, of course, Karen Whitfield herself. Judge and accuser. I called my attorney immediately and she agreed to attend the hearing alongside us. This might be the mistake she's been waiting to make, my attorney said calmly. I spent those 5 days organizing everything: doctor's letters, photos, the timeline, Priya's financial evidence. Frank offered to attend too, saying he wouldn't miss this show for anything in the world. The night before, Grandma held my hand and said, "Whatever happens, thank you for fighting." I told her the fight wasn't over. It was only just now becoming winnable. Hearing day arrived cold and bright, the community room packed tighter than I'd ever seen. Word had spread. Residents who'd stayed silent for years now filled every folding chair. Karen entered wearing a blazer sharp enough to cut glass, radiating false, practiced confidence. She opened by reading Grandma's case like a prosecutor reading charges against a criminal. Concerns have been raised regarding continued necessity of this parking accommodation, she announced coldly. My attorney stood immediately. Ms. Whitfield, may I ask who raised these concerns exactly? Karen hesitated, just half a second, but a half second was more than enough. The board has concerns, she said vaguely, avoiding naming any specific person or document. My attorney presented the doctor's letter, dated, signed, notarized, confirming permanent mobility limitations clearly. Karen dismissed it instantly. Medical opinions can be biased. We need independent verification. That was against her own bylaws, verbatim, and my attorney read Section 14 aloud. A murmur rippled through the room. Residents exchanged glances they'd never dared exchange before. Karen's composure cracked slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her otherwise controlled expression. The board reserves the right to interpret bylaws as needed, she snapped, too quickly. Interpret, or ignore? My attorney asked, and the room actually laughed, nervous and sharp. I stood up next, presenting the photographs of Karen's own repeated parking violations. If accommodations require strict review, perhaps we should review everyone's parking history equally, I said. Karen's face went pale under her makeup, jaw tightening as murmurs turned into open whispers. She tried to redirect the meeting, but Priya, sitting quietly, finally raised her hand. I have documentation regarding contract irregularities the board should also be aware of today. Karen's eyes snapped toward Priya with a look that could have frozen the entire room. This isn't the appropriate venue for that discussion, Karen said, voice suddenly higher, tighter. Then let's schedule the appropriate venue, my attorney said smoothly. Formally. In writing. Immediately. The room's energy shifted entirely. Residents who'd whispered complaints for years now spoke aloud. One woman stood and described a fine she'd received for a garden gnome violation. A young couple described losing their reserved spot after questioning a suspicious maintenance fee. One by one, stories poured out, each one small alone, devastating when stacked together. Karen tried banging a gavel she didn't officially have authority to use anymore. This hearing is about one parking spot, she insisted, voice cracking around the edges. No, my attorney said. This hearing is about a pattern. And patterns don't lie. Karen adjourned the meeting abruptly, storming out before any formal vote could be taken. But it was too late. The room had already seen behind the curtain that day. That night, Frank started a group chat titled Willowbrook Residents United, and it exploded overnight. 43 residents joined within hours, sharing their own stories, dates, fines and frustrations. I compiled every new account into my growing folder, now thick as a phone book. My attorney drafted a formal petition for a special board recall vote, per state law. We needed signatures from at least 25% of homeowners to force the vote. We had that number within 3 days. Willowbrook residents were done staying quiet. Karen, sensing the shift, tried a new tactic, charm offensive door-knocking with baked goods. Frank texted a photo of her holding banana bread outside a resident's door, captioned, "Too late." The recall petition was submitted formally, triggering a mandatory special meeting within 30 days. Karen responded by sending residents a mass email accusing a small vocal minority of harassment. Nobody believed her anymore. The minority, it turned out, had simply learned to speak up. 2 weeks before the recall vote, an anonymous tip arrived in my inbox, no name attached. It contained bank statements showing HOA reserve funds transferred into a personal account, Karen's account. My hands trembled reading numbers that big attached to a woman who fined people over gnomes. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who immediately looped in a forensic accountant for review. The accountant confirmed nearly $40,000 had moved through shell-like vendor accounts over 3 years. This was no longer just an HOA dispute. This was potential embezzlement, plain and documented. My attorney filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Regulatory Division and local police fraud unit. Karen, unaware how much we now knew, continued campaigning to keep her board seat. She held a town hall, promising transparency going forward, a word she'd never once practiced. Residents attended, polite but unconvinced, watching her performance like a play they'd already seen end. During Q&A, someone asked directly about the landscaping contracts. Karen's smile finally, visibly, faltered. "I have nothing to hide," she said, the classic phrase of someone hiding everything. 3 days before the recall vote, detectives contacted Karen requesting a formal interview regarding fund transfers. Word spread through the community faster than any newsletter Karen had ever mailed out herself. Grandma Rosa, watching from her porch, said, "Funny how fast dominoes fall once you tip one." The recall vote arrived, community room packed beyond capacity, extra chairs lining every wall. Karen stood to address the crowd, voice shaking despite her best effort at composure. "I've served this community faithfully," she began, but nobody in the room was buying it anymore. Priya stood and calmly read the financial discrepancies into the official record, page by page. My attorney presented the doctor's letter, the false hearing, the retaliation timeline, all together, undeniable. I presented photographs of Karen's own violations, stacked beside every fine she'd issued others. The room fell utterly silent as the pieces assembled into one damning, coherent picture. The vote was called. 91% in favor of immediate removal from the board. Karen's face drained of all color as the numbers were read aloud, unmistakable and final. She stood, grabbed her purse and tried to leave with whatever dignity remained intact. At the door, 2 detectives waited, badges out, asking her to step outside for questioning. The room watched in stunned, satisfying silence as Karen Whitfield walked out escorted, not applauded. Grandma Rosa squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt, tears bright Indiana her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it, Mija. For me and for everyone else." In the weeks that followed, the forensic investigation expanded, uncovering even more hidden transfers. Karen was formally charged with embezzlement, fraud and falsifying HOA financial documents over 3 years. Her husband's cousin's landscaping company was also investigated for its role in the invoice scheme. The state regulatory division fined the HOA itself for failing to properly oversee board spending. A new board was elected within the month, Priya as treasurer, Frank as vice president. One of their first official acts was reinstating Grandma Rosa's handicap parking, permanently, unconditionally. They also refunded every improperly collected fine from the past 3 years, with interest added. Grandma Rosa said it best, "Money can be refunded. Dignity takes a lot longer to return." My grandmother received an apology letter, signed by the entire new board, framed and hung proudly. Karen's SUV, the one that started it all, was repossessed after her assets got frozen. Ironically, IT was later towed from her own driveway for unpaid municipal fines, then scrapped. Frank sent me a photo of the tow truck hauling it away, captioned simply, "Karma parks here now." I laughed until I cried, standing beside Grandma on her porch, the handicap sign gleaming fresh. Karen eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges, avoiding trial but not consequence or public record. She was ordered to repay every stolen dollar, banned permanently from serving on any HOA board. She moved away quietly within the year, no farewell party, no banana bread, no goodbye at all. Willowbrook Estates slowly changed, meetings became actual conversations instead of one-woman monologues of control. Priya later told me the community had raised enough trust to finally repair the broken playground. Grandma Rosa still parks in that handicap spot every single day, cane steady, spirit steadier. Sometimes she waves at the empty space where Karen's SUV used to loom over everyone. I still keep my folder, thick with evidence, tucked safely in a drawer as a reminder. A reminder that quiet patience, paired with careful documentation, can dismantle even the loudest tyranny. Not every fight ends this cleanly. Ours took months, exhaustion and more fear than I admitted. But it also cost us something, months of stolen peace, sleepless nights, trust we can't fully rebuild. Grandma says the price was worth it. I still wonder some nights if any price truly is. What I know for certain is this: nobody should ever fall because someone else refused to move. If you see injustice happening quietly around you, document it. Speak up. Someone else is watching too. The parking spot is just a parking spot. Justice, once fought for, is so much more.